If you watched Anita Sarkeesian's Damsels in Distress videos, you might, if you are a gamer, think that she and her partner in crime, Jonathan McIntosh, have a screw loose, claiming that video games are somehow sexist, when a vast majority of games have no sexism at all. Games like Spy Hunter, Time Pilot, Missile Command, Galaga, Star Wars, Mousetrap, Assault, where you control a super tank, and countless other games where you don't control the actions of a person at all.
Yes, there is violence towards women in video games. There's also violence towards men in video games. That's not really a fucking surprise. I went into my collection of video games, and I picked out all the games that portray women in a positive light. Not necessarily as the main character, but games that portray women in a positive light. Here's what I found just after a few minutes of looking. Just looking at games and going, yes, yes, yes. Not thinking in depth into the plot as if there was some obscure character I missed, because there probably is in almost every single one of my games. But I'm going to give a few select examples that I picked out, because these are the best examples that you seem to just ignore, as if they don't exist. But they do, and they prove you wrong, which is probably why you're ignoring them. There's Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite, a strong female, not necessarily a lead, but, you know, she's there. And I'm not going to ruin anything in the story, I'm not going to go into the story, but she does play an important part, and she's not portrayed as weak, and she's not portrayed as owned by Booker. That's bullshit, because that's it. It doesn't happen. She makes her own choices. All of them do. Well, they don't really make their own choices, but they have their choices written for them by, you know, someone who wrote the story. Same with the guys. They're not owned by anybody. There is no sense of ownership. It's complicated. You know, a man doesn't own his wife, but a man cares about his wife. And that's not ownership, that's just caring. Same way a wife cares about her husband. That's not ownership. That's, you know, giving a shit. That's not ownership, that's giving a shit. Second is Lara Croft, and that's one of the bigger examples. The Tomb Raider game that didn't just came out. That came out recently, semi-recently. It's a relatively new game in comparison to game history, and it's amazing. And it's the origin story of Lara Croft, and she is portrayed as a freaking badass. She, you know, shoots people with a bow and arrow and kills people with a climbing axe, and it shows her origin story of how she saved another woman. So, by saving a woman, does she somehow make women weaker, despite the fact that she's making women stronger? Does it kind of cancel itself out? I don't know. Your logic is really hard to follow. It's a train of thought that I just can't seem to grasp. Next is Shell from the Portal series. You know, strong woman, fighting GLaDOS, another woman, not really saving anybody, but whatever. Jodie Holmes from Beyond Two Souls. Strong female lead. The protagonist. In fact, not Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite, but with Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, Shell from the Portal series, and Jodie Holmes from Beyond, you play as these women. You play. They are the only character in some of these cases that you play as. With Jodie Holmes from Beyond, you make your own decisions, and she's so realistically put into this character. And yes, you may play Beyond and go, oh, it's sexist that she has to, you know, dress up for a date in the game. Well, that's dumb, because she also does so much more in the game. She goes to a war zone. She fights to save people. She does all of these amazing things. And she proves that women are strong. Next is Avelina from the game Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, which is the Vita game. I think it's the only Assassin's Creed game where you play as a woman. Badass assassin. Again, strong female. She saves slaves in that game. She dresses up, you know, as like this isn't a whole part of the game. This isn't the entirety of the game. She dresses up as, you know, like in those big fancy dresses and goes to these parties. And the next minute she's dressed as an assassin, just killing men in the streets because they're bad. That's really the only reason. I mean, there's probably more of the story. Whatever. Next one is really one that seems almost contradictory. Call of Duty Ghosts. In Call of Duty Ghosts, you can customize your character and choose the gender of them, and that they will be that gender every time, which means you can be a woman. And you can shoot other dudes in the face. Again, women are strong. Not necessarily in the campaign. I don't know if there's any woman even in the campaign. But in the multiplayer, you can play as a woman. And you can kick ass. That's, it portrays women as strong. It portrays women. I mean, you can be, if you're a woman, you can be a woman. And then kick other guys' asses. Next is Ellie from The Last of Us. Another badass female. She kicks ass in The Last of Us, and you get to play as her. Well, not necessarily for most of the game, you still get to play as her. And you may look at the game and go, oh, well, Joel is just rescuing her, and that depowers her as a woman. That's bullshit. Because he's not claiming ownership. He's saving her life, usually. That's what's happening in the game. So you would rather her die and be able to, die and be like, oh, well, at least she died a woman. It's a horrible argument. Next is Claire Redfield from the Resident Evil series. There's more women in the Resident Evil series, by the way, like Jill Valentine. But Claire Redfield is one of the someone you play as. She's another badass female. And last on my short list, because I could go on, are two women, Chloe and Elena from the Uncharted series. Amazing females who end up saving Nathan Drake's ass multiple times. They're not portrayed as weak. They're portrayed as strong usually. Sometimes stronger than Nathan Drake himself. Sometimes smarter than him too. They're portrayed as equals in the game. And that's how it should be. Not in every game. And don't call me sexist for saying that, because I'll explain. In some games, the man is the protagonist and is above everybody in the freaking universe. They're the one destined to save, they're the only one who can save the universe, who can save the world. It's been all entrusted to them, in which case, yes, they are above it. But at the same time, you have games like Tomb Raider and Beyond. Both games where they are, in Beyond, if it wasn't for Jodie, the world would be dead. Just completely fucked. But because of her, she's the only one who can save the world, which means she is better than every guy in that game. Every guy in that universe, she is better than. See what I'm saying? There's give and take.
This is going to be my best segment here, because I've actually looked online of female heroines that I love in video games. A lot of video games that have female heroines. And right off the bat, the first link that I saw, 50 beautiful, representations of heroine woman in video games. And guess what, Anita? They're all clothed. Most of them are clothed. Newsflash, most of them have their full clothes on. For point being an example, Tomb Raider, wonderful game, Lara Croft, great heroine character. Everybody, a wide variety, a wide audience. People love that game ever since the 90s. Metroid, Samus Aran, of course, a big person in the heroine aspects of video gaming. Then you have Bayonetta. You have the girl from Blood Rain. You have Elizabeth from BioShock. She had her own solo game that tied in very heavily to the BioShock storyline. If you played BioShock Burial at Sea Part 2, then you have, of course, Madison Page from Heavy Rain. Then you have Alex Vance from Half-Life. Then you have Jill Valentine from Resident Evil. You have Shell from Portal. You have Joanne Dark from Perfect Dark, one of my favorite all-time FPS games of ever. Then you have, of course, what else do we have? You have Jade from Beyond and Good and Evil. We have Commander Shepard, the female version, in a wide variety of ethnicities, and I'll get to ethnicity in a minute. And, of course, we have Faith from Mirror's Edge. And, like I said, there's so many more. That's only a handful of great heroines in video games that Anita doesn't seem to acknowledge. Doesn't seem to acknowledge them at all. I don't see one of her videos saying, oh, but I don't see one of format of her video which says, yes, there are some damsels in distress that I don't like, but in addition to that, we have so-and-so and so-and-so that are a good uplifting representation of women in video games. Not once have I ever heard her say that. Not once have I ever heard her mention these great women that are represented in video games. Not one time. And I can't be wrong. And Anita, if you're watching this video, please correct me. Like I said, I would love to discuss this. I would love...
So in 1981, we had the first female protagonist in a video game. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this was Ladybug. Also hitting the arcades, we had Mrs. Pac-Man, also in 1981, where again, you are the female protagonist. In 1982, we had a game known as Kangaroo. This was a female protagonist in which you play as a female kangaroo searching for her lost baby. In 1984, we have The Girl's Garden, in which you are another female protagonist. Although you have a boyfriend, you are playing as the main character, bashing up bad guys. 1 year later, in 1985, we get the first game to include a female ninja called Ninja Princess. Also in 1985, we have the female character Toby Chrissy Malrazu in the game known as Baraduke, another female protagonist. Another great game that I actually happened to play that came out in 1985 was Lady Master of Kung Fu, and this is actually a lot like Street Fighter, except you are a female Kung Fu master, female protagonist, beating up guys on the street. In the year 1986, we had another game known as The Return of Ishtar. This actually had two female protagonists known as Ki, and Gilgamesh. Also in 1986, we had the most beloved and one of my most favorite female protagonist characters of all time, Samus Aran for Metroid. Wing of Medulla, another 1986 game that had another female protagonist known as Lucia. Very first 1987 game known as Phantasy Star, you play as Alice Landau, which is actually the first female RPG role-playing character that you get to play, who again, female protagonist. I could sit here all day and list game after game after game that exclusively has female protagonists, which you seem to think doesn't really exist, or if it does exist, female protagonists in video games are very rare. I'm here to tell you they're not, and I'm going to list you my personal list of games that I've actually played all the way through thoroughly, of games that have female protagonists or female characters in which you can play, and the game is based upon that female character. Here's the games that I've played through: Gravity Rush, Fairy Bloom Frisia, Borderlands 2, Diablo 3, Offspring Fling, Final Fantasy 13, Amy, Dead Island, Loom, Portal 2, Portal, Dragon Age 2, Hydrophobia, one of my most favorite games, Beyond Good and Evil, Mirror's Edge, Heavy Rain, Bayonetta, Bayonetta 2, which is in the works, Dead Space Extraction, Wet, Velvet Assassin, Caroline the Game, Rosemary, Heavenly Swords 1 and 2, Bullet Witch, Perfect Dark 0, Cameo Elements of Power, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, Blood Rain, Underworld Eternal War, Sword of Mana, Silent Hill 2 and 3, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, Dino Crisis, Golden Axe 1, 2, and 3. And I can sit here and list more upon more upon more games that I've personally played through that have female protagonists. But the main reason I'm making this video, Feminist Frequency, is to kind of refute your idea that almost all video games have the idea of damsel in distress. And even if they do have the damsel in distress, so what? And to refute your comment regarding Mario, and, you know, Mario has to save Princess Peach, and she's always this woman who can't be dependent without having Mario around, I want you to take a look at Super Princess Peach. That's a game that came out for the Nintendo DS, in where the roles are completely reversed. We have Princess Peach, the woman who you seem to think is being objectified by Mario and is being a terrible role model for women. Princess Peach saves Mario. It's a true game. Look it up. Super Princess Peach. It only came out a few years ago. Princess Peach saves the day, and she saves Mario. So right there, if you had put a little more effort into your actual video behind the research of video games, you would realize that your points that you bring up about women always being damsels in distress is bullshit. Some of my most favorite video games include female protagonists. Look at Metroid Prime, for example, the whole Metroid Prime franchise. Much less, look at the new Tomb Raider game. The new Tomb Raider game is amazing, it's incredible. And you're a female character, and you're badass, and you kill people, and you kick ass, and it's brutal. If you haven't played the new Tomb Raider game, Feminist Frequency, I suggest you do.